Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Mark from Solar Games, and today I'm gonna do a quick video and just show you some comparisons between Mattel and Hasbro. So yesterday I released my video on Hasbro's pre-announcement of their Q4, which is really bad, actually. It's so bad that they basically had to also in the same Q4 pre-announcement tell investors that they're about to lay off 1,000 employees, which is 17% of their workforce, which should save them $300 million. That's basically getting super desperate. So I started thinking like, hey, if this is how Hasbro is being run, how are other competitor companies like Mattel is being run? So pretty easy in Google, you can do like comparison of two stocks. Stock price obviously is not a representation of how the company is being run, but it does show you just some general ideas of like confidence of, at least investors in the companies, and probably why WotC is being pushed so hard in the way that they've been pushed recently, right? Making certain decisions and choices that are not ideal for players. So first of all, just to prove to you that Mattel is a comparable to WotC, as you can see, putting their two graphs together, you can see they pretty much trade in tandem. Every peak and every trough of Mattel is also a trough for WotC or Hasbro, and same for any peaks. But as you can see, basically Mattel is already pulling ahead of Hasbro starting this year, and likely after tomorrow's stock price, it's gonna be even a bigger gap here. All right, if we take a look at the 1 year, you can see basically consistently throughout 2022, Mattel has been trading at a 20% premium to WotC pretty much consistently throughout the whole year. This is just, it doesn't tell you everything, but it does tell you that in general, investors are more confident in Mattel as a company over Hasbro. And if we take a look at the 5 year mark here, you can see Hasbro was on top at a certain point. And in fact, right here, this is around in that 2018, 2019 era. I mean, Hasbro was doing super well. Part of this is because they were telling all the investors that WotC was going to become the first $1 billion brand and all that stuff, and all the sales are doing super well. I mean, their numbers are looking up. Wizard of the Coast is growing their business, exponentially. So of course their stock should trade as such. But of course, come March, you can see this dip here. This is just the COVID dip. So this was going to hit everybody. There's no helping it. There's nothing that either company did wrong technically to see this dip. And as you can see, right after when we hit the recovery in that era, WotC Mattel both went up, and of course WotC being on top of Mattel makes sense during this time simply because of the history of where they came from before. But around that November era, you can see Mattel actually crosses WotC in its, basically the premium here. And the reason why this happened, I think partially is because there was a lot of news coming out from WotC where, they're not doing well or sales didn't do well, this kind of stuff, overprinting, all that stuff. So again, the problem even back then was happening. And if you remember what sets were released around here was Zendikar Rising, right? Zendikar Rising didn't really do super well. It felt was overprinted. WotC introducing many, many products. In addition to that, Hasbro as a whole, bought a media company and just really kind of tanked their own books because they had to pay $4 billion to purchase this company. And I mean, look, I covered this in another video about how terrible that was an idea to spend so much money. In fact, Disney spent $4 billion for Marvel. I would argue Marvel is a much better IP than, or Marvel Studios is a much better IP than whatever this one entertainment thing is. So, anyways, as you can see, that's why the gap really started widening between Mattel and Hasbro. It's almost like a 50% difference here in a lot of these comparables here. So, um, one thing that's really interesting to kind of illustrate how poorly WotC is run is if you look at how much the company is making and how much revenue they're having. So again, just want to differentiate profit from revenue. Profit is, revenue minus cost is profit. So top line revenue for Mattel in 2021 was reported as 5.46 billion. And if we look at WotC top line revenue in 2021, it's reported as 6.4 billion. So WotC make 1 billion over Mattel. So how did they do as far as earnings go? The price to earning ratio for Mattel was actually 12.16 there. And for Hasbro, it was 21.37. Now, Hasbro obviously is still a bigger company than Mattel, even with the current stock valuation pricing. It should actually be a lot bigger. But with the current stock prices, yeah, it's going to be rough. And actually, Mattel has way more employees, almost 6 times more employees than Hasbro. I suspect this is because Mattel actually runs their own factories. And so, of course, you have a lot of blue collar employees. They're going to, really pump this number up. Whereas Hasbro might only have white collar employees who are more like designers, artists, who are building the game, that kind of thing, marketing, and not actually crafting, creating. As I know from the WotC side, at least, a lot of their production is done by third parties. So they contract out printers and printing, all those facilities, those kind of things. So they don't need as many employees. However, if you live in the US and understand how in US works, human capital or employees is actually oftentimes the most costly part of a company. So having 6 times more employees usually will cost you more human resource wise than having 6,000. Again, high skill labor does not cost the same as low skill labor, but still, this thing is a big difference here. Still, if you consider WotC making better top line revenue than Mattel by 1 billion, then please explain to me why WotC actually has a higher PE. Now, so for those of you guys who don't understand what PE is, PE stands for price to earning ratio. Basically, it's the stock price to how much is earned in that year, the earnings, and it illustrates like how many years for based on the current earnings will the company basically be will the earnings equate to the total worth of the company. So in this case, Mattel, it takes 12 years, and then WotC or Hasbro here it takes 21 years. But again, so in general, if the earning is higher, then this ratio is lower, means it takes less time to earn back the entire company. Okay, so you can imagine if you have a company, your company, let's say, is worth $10 and you're earning $10 this year, your earnings is $10. That means that you can buy your own company, in that same year. So that's a price to earning ratio of 1. But imagine if your company is worth $100 and you earn the same $10, then your ratio is going to be 10 to 1. So again, or 10. So in that case, it's, it takes you 10 years to go earn back the entire company. So if WotC is actually making a higher top line revenue, then how come their bottom line profit is so much lower than Mattel? In fact, when you look at these numbers, Mattel basically almost doubles WotC's profit. If you see this type of price to earning ratio, but WotC actually has much lower top line revenue, that actually kind of makes sense. It just means that the company is taking in less money and maybe their cost is kept in control, but there's some basic fixed costs that they must pay. And that's why they're, maybe it's like a terrible year type of thing. But if their top line revenues are similar, then WotC's costs are way out of control. And that's why you see these differentiations of numbers here. And just how bad, if you want to look at it. So let's take a look at Mattel, let's say Q3 here versus WotC's Q3. Now, we already know WotC had a terrible Q3, but let's just see how bad or how different it is. So on WotC's side, for Q3, their revenue is 1.6 billion. Their net income or profit is 129 million, right? And that's basically their ratio here. And if you look at the net income for Mattel in that same period, it's actually 289 million, almost 3 times WotC's profit on about the same revenue. So the revenue is 1.76, whereas WotC's 1.68. So pretty close to the same, about like 100 million, I guess, less or more. But that's where really that difference is. Again, this is not financial advice. I'm not recommending one stock over another. I'm just sharing my perspective about the two companies. And all right, I'll see you next time. Bye.